Great. Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know how much any of you travel by air, but if you do, whether it's for work or whether it's for fun, I think we can all agree that it's not an enjoyable experience anymore. So last winter, you remember we've had some great winters, the last couple winters, and I was stuck in Kansas City. And I was due to be home. It's a Friday, been a long week. I was due to be home by noon. So fast forward about midnight, after a couple reroutes, I'm sitting in the O'Hare airport at about midnight, and I'm finally getting ready to board. So I get on a pretty small plane. So, you've got your coat, and you're schlepping, and there's snow, it's just cold and wet. I'm tired. And so I get in, and I get situated, and I'm just so tired. I don't like to think of myself as a friendly person, but I really didn't feel like chatting with anyone. So I did the universal thing when you don't want to talk to the person next to you. I put in my headphones, right? So I put in my headphones. I'm too tired to work. I'm just flipping through a magazine. And in walks my partner who's going to be sitting next to me. And he's like 6'7", comes in, it's like, oh, let him in. It's one of those, okay, we're all sitting there and finally get going. So I'm flipping through a magazine. And there it is, in black and white, what I've been trying to teach professionals like you for a really long time. It said, executive presence is not a magical gene that's inherited. It's acquired through a lot of hard work. And I went, amen to that. We know when you have your headphones on and you're not sure if you said something out loud. So all of a sudden, I get a tap on the shoulder from my friendly giant, and I said, yes? And he's like, I'm totally with you! And I'm thinking, how does this guy know what I'm thinking? And then I very quickly realized that they'd been on the PA system and saying they would be coming through the aisles and a beer and wine would be available for $6. Amen to that. So it is with that same enthusiasm today, I would like to teach all of you the fact that executive presence is a skill that can be developed with hard work. So executive presence is a, say it with me, skill that can be developed with a lot of hard work. Great. And so you already instinctively know a lot of things about executive presence, just being where you are in your career and your profession. I look through the room, I know a lot of you, and I already know you're successful, and you already have your ways of communicating, and you have presence. So before I get into the agenda, what I would love for you to do, you have a worksheet in front of you, and it asks you to fill out a couple things on the front page there. One is what you're hoping to get out of this morning. If you're going to spend an hour, you certainly want to get something out of it. And also, there's a little category box at the bottom. If you could just fill out what you already do as far as executive presence, as far as your successes. There are things that you already do right now that work for you. All right, so if you could jot down those and then write down your challenges as well, just one or two. I'm just going to give you like a minute and a half to do this real quickly. Okay, and as you're wrapping that up, if you would, turn to one of your neighbors and share one of your successes with each other. So just real quickly, back and forth, share one success that you do right now. Make sure you introduce yourself, say hello. Okay, if you haven't switched, switch yet. Switch if you need to. Okay, come on back. So did everybody get at least one tip? Everybody get a nugget? Did you learn something brilliant from your neighbor? Yes? All right, so already you have your nugget, right? So you already have paid, you've gotten your value for your price of admission today, right? Got a little tip from your neighbor? All right, so instinctively, as I said before, you already know a lot about executive presence. And if I can turn the slides here. Let's try this. So I could do the old-fashioned way. So you do already instinctively know. I tried it, I really did test it out. So we'll do I'll let you do that. Seems to be stuck, even here. So anyway. You already instinctively know a lot of different things about executive presence. And so what we're going to cover today, a couple of different things. One is exactly define what it is, right? What is executive presence? Do you have it or not? And then what I find the most valuable is give you a couple of tips to make sure that you're communicating it well. Are we there? Brilliant. We love this. And finally, how do you get it, right? Give you some very specific tips. So when you were talking with each other about different ideas and ways to convey your executive presence, and you got those tips, it's interesting. We can always say, does someone have executive presence? Yes. Does he or she have it? Yes. But do we really know why? So let's try. Let's do a little quiz here. Executive presence, yes or no? Okay, this is the part where you talk. Okay, good, yeah, yes, okay. There are no political editorials here. How about Zuckerberg? Well, mixed, how many say yes? How many say no? Okay, you're mixed. Boehner? It wasn't supposed to be a comedy. It was just yes or no. Okay, how about Lester Holt? Okay. Hillary? They get quieter when they're political. How about Miley? Maybe? Kid Rock? Homer? Nope. No, maybe not so much. How about this guy? Anybody know this guy? Does anybody know? Okay. You know him, Mike? Okay. Would you say yes? Yes. You say yes. Other people, would you say yes for now, or can you answer? Not sure, maybe yes. And so the reason why I put Chris up here, and by the way, he's a business owner of WD Partners, which is an A&E architecture firm located in Dublin. He's actually out of California, but he does have executive presence. But you don't know enough, some of you don't have enough information yet, right? So those other ones really yes, no, because we're basing it on different intel that we already have. So there are things that we can actually break down. So you can say yes, no, and a couple are like, I'm not sure. So there's different criteria why you're answering the way you answer. And so what we're going to do is just spend a couple of minutes going through what I call the 5 C's, really 6 C's of executive presence, and really break down what it is. And as we do that, I'm going to ask you to grade yourself in each one of these different categories. All right, so on the back of your sheet there, it actually has a little grading. So when you look at what I call the essentials of executive presence, the first is confidence, right? People who have executive presence are confident. So how do people demonstrate confidence? How do you know if someone's confident or not? I'm sorry? Body language, absolutely. And I like that you answered so quickly. And look at this. Some people call this bribery. I like to think of this as positive reinforcement, right? Or breakfast. Yeah, that's even better. Very good. Very good. So body language, what else? Speak with conviction. What are other indicators within body language? Eye contact, big one. Posture.
Comfortable in a group.
Comfortable in a group. Smiling. Smile is a big one. Smiling, big, 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 big. I also think that when you think about what makes someone confident, and I think this is really what distinguishes leaders a lot in the world, especially today, is that people who are confident are comfortable with uncertainty. We lead with uncertainty, but it's just the way it is, right? It just feels, I think the environment feels more uncertain today because changes happen more quickly, but it's always been uncertain. And that doesn't, people who are confident, that doesn't shake them, right? It's just the way it is. So if you can be comfortable in that environment, that certainly is a great way to show confidence. People who are confident also, they're okay with being wrong. They don't have to know everything. They're comfortable with what they know, and they're comfortable with what they don't know. They're not afraid to find the expertise. Rarely do you find the person that absolutely has to be right all the time that is super confident. Being able to have that, oh, I don't know that part, let's find the answer. That's okay, and they're comfortable with admitting when they don't know something. So you have a school like grade school. I'd like for you, a scale on your sheet there, I'd like you to grade yourself in the area of the first C of confidence. Okay, so the second C of executive presence is connection. And this is really the ability to do just that, is the ability to make sure that you connect and foster relationships. It's all about relationships. Now, the real distinction here of people that have executive presence, they make connections, not transactions. Now, we all know the busier you get and the higher up you get and the more people you talk to, your schedules become crazy, right? But real people with executive presence have the ability to make each and every person feel special and listened to, even if it's in 10-second increment, right? Maybe you don't have a lot of time. Maybe it's just a handshake. Maybe it's just an introduction. But they make you feel that they are absolutely connecting with you and they are looking at you of who you are. Think of the great leaders in your life. And think, have they connected with you? Absolutely. When I was a young punk many years ago, I cut my teeth at the Limited in investor and government relations. And one day, Sam Walton, had come in the office, and I was literally a teenager. I mean, I was actually a teenager. Oh my gosh, remember those days. And he comes by our little cubicle, and he was looking for my boss, and asked where he was. Of course, I gave an answer. I'm thinking, I think I know. Is that? I wasn't sure if it was him or not. And he comes back and he goes, well, thank you. What's your name, honey? Oh, what are you doing? What do you do here? Where do you study? What do you blah, blah, blah? He asked me like 10 questions. I thought, I am completely irrelevant in this man's life, right? And he left and he's like, well, you keep doing that. That's good. You keep doing that. When you want a real job, you come see me. But he made me feel special all these years later. I remember that. That's executive presence. That's executive presence. So having that ability to really connect with who the person is what people with executive presence do. Similarly, people that make that connection, they have the ability to use empathy. You're going to hear me talk about empathy a lot today. Empathy is such a critical component of executive presence, of communication, of leadership, of everything. Empathy doesn't mean you don't have to agree with someone, but being able to understand where they come from is certainly an important part of connection. Has anyone ever heard of Cialdini, the influence principles? So Cialdini's out there, and this is a kind of what the guru scholar on the principles of influence and what influences people. And one of the strongest principles of influence is likeness. And what I mean by likeness is, we're always trying to find common ground with people, right? Oh, you went to Otterbein, I went to Otterbein. You have 2 kids, I have 2 kids. You love to travel, I love to travel. There's a reason that we do that, because it makes us more influential. We are influenced more by people who are like us. So how many of you use Yelp? You ever get on Yelp and look at things or look at reviews? What we do when we go through that process is we try to find people who look like us, right? So you think, oh, wow, this person kind of lives the same thing I do, or that I would probably like that hotel too. So when you're looking at connection, that's why people with executive presence do try to find that common ground and try to find what the likeness is, because it's a way to connect and it's a way to influence. So I would like for you now to grade yourself in the second area of connection. So the third C of executive presence, you're looking for, oh, you need a chair, okay, oh, yeah, sure. The third C of executive presence is clarity. And this is really a big one with people with executive presence. Everyone has good ideas. Most people have good ideas. Everyone has something to offer. But if you're not able to articulate it, it doesn't matter. You know, I have lots of wonderful people I work with that say, my work speaks for itself. I hate to tell you, you speak for your work. Now, you have to back it up, but people with executive presence know how to give clarity around things. So think about when you're in a meeting and people are going down into the details that are not the details aren't important, but they're not aligning it to the big picture. Someone with executive presence has the ability to say, the reason why we need this, IT project is blah, blah, blah. And they bring it back and align it to the goal, right? They align it to a real vision. That is a great skill. Being able to frame something for a group can be the difference between moving or getting stuck. So people with executive presence do this, and they do this well. So it's really the ability to have a vision and to see the big picture and to be able to articulate it very simply. I always say if you can't communicate something in 10 words or less, you need to start again, right? It's easier to write, it's usually easier to write 3 pages than to write a paragraph and say the same thing. People with executive presence use clarity, they use simple language, they make it very, very, very simple, right? So if you would give yourself a grade in the area of clarity. So moving along, the fourth essential C of executive presence is communication. And all of these things can be so interrelated, but people with great executive presence are good communicators. And this is when I go back to empathy. The best communicators I've ever had the experience to work with have great empathy. You have to understand where your audience is coming from, what they feel, what they believe, what they think, how they process. It doesn't mean you have to agree. If we all agreed, it would be a very, very boring world. But you have to respect the person. And it's the whole adage I always tell people when I'm facilitating is that, we have to be tough on the issues and easy on each other. And that's what people with executive presence do. It's not personal, right? It's not personal, but you do have to understand where the other person, and respect where the other person's coming from. People with executive presence do that. People with executive presence communicate generously, but judiciously. And what I mean by that, they keep everyone in the loop, but they aren't the ones that go on and on and on and on and don't listen, right? Communication is definitely two-way. People of executive presence have the ability to make sure you stay in the loop. Think about, are you ever insulted when someone keeps you in the loop on something, right? We all feel valued. It helps things run better. I mean, certainly you don't need to know everything. That's why I say judiciously, but making sure you're in the know on important things relevant to the organization and moving things over is certainly critical. People with great executive presence do this. They make sure that everyone has understanding and buy-in along the whole process. And it's not an easy thing to do. I find where communications, when they break down at the leadership level, it's not a malicious thing. It's usually just an oversight and being busy. People with executive presence, they do that. They spend the extra time thinking and making the effort to communicate. It's work, remember? Because executive presence is a skill that can be developed with a lot of hard work. Good, so we all know that. So go ahead and give yourself a grade in communication. So the fifth C is credibility. Where do people get their credibility from? How do you know if someone's credible? Their past, their experience, for sure, definitely. How else? Values. Yes, isn't that a brilliant thing? If everyone would just do what they say we're going to do, it would be a perfect world, right? So their track record, their experience, their credentials, their education, the best kind of credibility, third-party credibility, what other people say about them, right? When someone else tells you about someone, it makes it a whole different kind of level of credibility. All these different kinds of things. and this is one that everyone feels more comfortable with. Credibility feels more black and white, right? That we can say, yes, I have my PhD in history or whatever, I'm an expert. But go ahead and give yourself a grade in credibility. So the 5 C's we've gone through, those are what I call the essentials. Then we have what I call the 6th C, which is charisma. Now, I hear a lot of people say, oh, that executive presence stuff. I'm not an extrovert. I'm not one of those types. You know, I like to keep to myself and get my work done, and I don't care if you're an introvert or extrovert. It doesn't matter. Right? To have executive presence, you just need to communicate. If you're a leader, whether you're an introvert or extrovert, it doesn't matter. You have to communicate. Some of the best leaders I know are introverted, but they communicate. So charisma is a whole different thing. You know, some of those people that just have, I think 0.01% of the population has charisma. So the rest of us, we just have to work, right? We have to work really hard. And that's okay, because we know executive presence is a skill that can be developed with hard work. But this is not an excuse for everybody else to say, hey, I'm not one of those. I've never been like that. That's not my personality. I don't care. You still have something to offer, and you have to tell people about it and articulate it. So for charisma, I don't expect people to have charisma, right? If you do, you're lucky. Right? I've had people say, well, executive presence, you know, so-so's 6'5", and he looks like he can be on the front of GQ. Like, well, great. Is it going to be easier? Maybe. But so what? It doesn't mean all of us. We can all have executive presence. It doesn't matter what we look like. It's a whole behavior thing, right? So the point I have about charisma is most of us don't have it. But that's okay. But it's not an excuse not to do the other things. Right? So I still want you to give yourself a grade in charisma, because I'm sure there are people in here that do have charisma. Okay, so tell me, before we move on, I would like to see a show of hands. How many people gave themselves an A in the area of confidence? That's a confident crowd, okay. All right, that was good. How about in connection? Okay, a few more. I've got my people on this side of the room. Clarity, good. That's a very good one. I think that's probably the hardest one. Communication, getting a few more, or maybe just having more coffee. Credibility, here go the hands. Look around the room. Do it again, put your hands up. Yeah, it feels comfortable, right? Because you got validation from a third party to give yourselves credibility. Charisma. Oh, love it. Thank goodness there's one of you in the group, right? Because I know it's a very special thing. So how many of you did not give yourself an A in any area? Okay, so here's my message to my friends who just raised their hand. Give yourself an A in one area. If you're going to have executive presence, you have to believe in yourself, right? I'm not saying you go around and say you're perfect. Yes, we all need to strive to get better continually. But you have to acknowledge an area that you're good in, right? It's okay. People with executive presence are comfortable with what they've earned and who they are. Don't be such a hard grader. So you don't want to fall prey to what I call the 99 rule. So the 99 is, you get a 99 on a test, and what do? Oh, what the hell did I miss? What's wrong with me? I was so close. We do it, don't we? We all do that. We all do that. Try not to. Because the reality is you got a 99. If you are always looking for that one more point, you are not going to have executive presence. We are after success, not perfection. If I was with a group of attorneys, and no offense, I went to law school, I'm in, but if I asked a group of attorneys, none of them would give themselves an A in any category. It's the training. It's hard on people if you don't acknowledge where you're good. So for those of you that didn't give yourselves an A, give yourself an A in the category, and don't be too hard on yourself, right? Okay. So why does this stuff even matter? I'm just going to flip through a couple of slides real quickly. For those of you, there's some people in the group here that know me. I'm very much a research person. I think hunches are great as long as they're backed up by fact. So if you look at some of the research in here of why things matter and why executive presence matter, if you really look at the fact that 85% of why we get, keep, and move ahead in our jobs are really a lot of times based on people skills. So we all have this great technical expertise, but the fact is we have to work in a different environment. If you look at how leadership is changing, we are really shifting from a command and control world to a world of influence completely. So this really matters. You should be working on this just as much, if not more, than the other things that you work on to be successful in whatever it is you want to do. This is it's an older study, but I really enjoy the study. When you think about what we have to research and what we have to use as precedent, it's mostly public companies, because that's where we get our information. We're allowed to have access to that information and how it really, literally adds to the bottom line. And this is a research that used to be done annually. It's a little old now, but when you look at a CEO of a public company, I think you could insert the word leader. Or a leader of a private company, or a leader of a public institution, or it doesn't matter, nonprofit, just insert leader. All these different things they found out are based on the individual reputation of the CEO. Whether someone decides if they want to invest in that company, whether they want to recommend it as a good place to work, whether they want to recommend it as a good strategic partner. Now, all these different kind of things. It really does matter. Not just what you do, but who you are. It really does matter. And it matters to the bottom line as well. The reason why I like this research is it really tells us that not only are things just not linear assets, but if we do just a little bit more, I love the study in Stanford, if you write one more handwritten note, if you try to connect a little bit more, if you pay a little more attention listening, if you just do a little bit of work, it's going to come back at you almost 2.5 times. So it's worth investing in your executive presence, and it's really worth making the effort to get up at 7:30 in the morning and listen to it and really think about it. So I always think the most important thing when I come to a session like this is I always hope that, gosh, I want to take something away, right? I want to learn something I can go and use today. So that's what this section is. It's really talking about very specific things that you can do to enhance your executive presence. So first is to pay attention to really observe. So how many of you have ever seen yourself on videotape? How many of you enjoyed that experience? Isn't it awful? But it's so necessary. In fact, I was really impressed by how many of you just raised your hand. I was very impressed, because most people really try to avoid that. In our world today, it's so easy to practice on videotape. Whether it's presenting, whether it's you're getting ready for a meeting, whether you just have a really important conversation you have to have. You need to see yourself on video if you have not, okay? It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. Nobody has to know. And if you want to put it up on YouTube, have family night, knock yourself out. But it really is important for you to make sure that you see how you are behaving. Another thing to do is to ask others for feedback. There's someone in your organization who sees you every day. There's someone who, whether you're in meetings with, or saw you present, or has worked with you, or maybe just someone that you know is in your realm. Ask them, and be ready for the feedback. The reason why people don't like feedback is because sometimes it can be hard to take. Okay? Remember, we're after success, not perfection. So we do want to get better, and the only way you're going to get better is when you figure out what to assess the situation. So make sure that you have a very, very, very honest assessment of where you are. How many of your organizations do 360 feedback tools through assess? A few of you. I mean, there's good and bad to those. I think there are different ways to get feedback, but it's important. And then the other aspect of feedback and observation is to pay attention to other people. So find someone, a leader or a peer, competitor, client, whatever it might be, whom you admire, and watch what he or she does. and observe. Usually when you try to find someone that you want to, review or watch and really observe and say, well, I like how he did this, or I like how she did that, odds are that you will gravitate to someone that has a similar style that you do. So if you're more formal, you're going to be attracted to someone that has a more formal style, et cetera. But find a couple of people and really pay attention. I had someone tell me, I gave someone this task once, and they came back and say, so we went through all the, findings. And then he said, let me tell you what the best thing was about that. He goes, that 6-hour meeting flew by, because I was sitting there doing all these other things, observing everyone's behavior, and so it gave a whole different dimension. So whatever the benefit is, go for it. But do observe and make sure you get honest feedback about yourself. That's the first place to start. So the second thing to do is make sure that you project confidence, right? So this is one, you've heard the fake it till you make it, and I do believe in that a little bit, but odds are that you just have to, you have to make sure that you know what you're doing first, right? Usually if we're prepared and not over-prepared, we're prepared, not over-prepared, there's a difference, we're confident, right? If you go into something, you know you've done your homework, you know your stuff, that's great. If you try to over-prepare, it makes it worse. So get to the point where you know your stuff and then believe, right? The most important thing about projecting confidence is what not to do. So the behavior on the right-hand column there, I see a lot. So we get criticized, and we immediately want to explain why it happened. This is why it happened this way. And if someone does that to you, you're thinking, excuse, just let it go, right? So people that don't have confidence constantly have to tell you exactly why. This is why it happened, da-da-da-da-da. It goes back into that perfectionism. Right? So make sure you're not that person. Because when someone does that to me, I'm like, they're not confident in what they did. If you made a mistake, that's okay. I mean, it's okay, as long as we fix it, right? So you have other things. We've already talked about body posture, body language is all big. Another really big thing about confidence is congruence. And what I mean by congruence is what you're projecting is what you're saying. So for example, someone got up to the front of the room and said, I'm so excited to be here. What are you going to believe? Are you going to believe what I say, or are you going to believe how I act, right? So that happens so much around how you project confidence that really affects it. So when you get up and you're nervous, whether it's, and nervous when you always have to be up in front of a room, you can be in a meeting. You're in a meeting, it's like maybe 40 people, and you're thinking, I have something I want to say. And you start to get ready to say it, and then someone says, and you're like, man, he sounds really nervous, right? Just take a big deep breath and project and believe what you're going to say, go for it. So the biggest thing I always tell people about nerves, because this all comes through confidence, is if you truly focus on how you're trying to contribute and how you can help the person in the room next to you, your team, you're not going to think about you're not going to care what people are thinking about you. You don't have time to think about that. That's the only time we mess up, is when we're in our own heads. If you truly get into a meeting and think, and you are focused on how you can help the outcome, how you can help the person in front of you, you won't get nervous ever again. You won't. Because you will be so focused on doing the right thing and because really at the end of the day, we all just want to contribute, right? We all want to move forward. We want to contribute to the world. We want to make a difference. It's true. And so if you focus on that, you're not going to be nervous anymore. So confidence, that gives you a couple tips on how to actually go out and project confidence right away. So I know there's been lots of different things about personal branding, and there's a couple things on your worksheet about personal brand. But your brand is really what people think about you, what you stand for, all these different things. When we think of great commercial brands, we think of logos, and we might think of that, but it's really all the different dimensions that make up a great brand, right? So what are some great brands you buy? Apple.
Ohio State.
Oh, do you see that? You hear that? I didn't hear that, the problem with the microphone. Ohio State, the Ohio State University. What else? Honda, okay. Great. So they're all reasons that we love these brands and that we gravitate to these brands. What was it? I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Said Volkswagen.
Oh, Volkswagen. Well, Volkswagen actually is a very, very good example of how, when you are not true to your brand, what happens, right? So if you change that to the personal, like a person, take a brand, Tiger Woods. He's a family man, right? Volkswagen, they care about the environment. So when you project and do the complete opposite, so excited to be here. I mean, that's bad stuff, right? So that's a really important part of branding, is when you're not true to your brand. So when you think about all these different things about you as your individual personal brand, how you introduce yourself, what your passions are, your experience, your hobbies, how you like to have fun, who you hang out with, all of these things are part of your brand. All of them are. So right now, I want you to think about, what is the compliment you get the most? And I want you to share it out loud, somebody. What's the compliment you get the most? Honesty. That's a good one to have. What else? Look at this. Look. Yes.
But I have to give that back because I teach ethics and I don't take anything.
Okay, good. That's being very honest. Sarah, sell out for me. What do you got? Responsiveness. Who else? Couple more.
Courageous.
Hard work. Heard another one. Courageous. The compliment you get the most, start paying attention, because that is what your brand is right now. So a brand is a favorable description of something. So for example, Coca-Cola is a great brand. Coca-Cola doesn't say, if you drink too much, will rot your teeth, and if you drink too much Diet Coke, the aspartame is going to mess up your brain, right? You lead with your strengths. Right? So no one brand, no one person is perfect. But a brand helps you lead with your strengths. I am not expecting you to be perfect. I want you to lead with your strengths. So pay attention to what you stand for and what compliment you get the most, and be very, very cognizant of what your brand is. It's also really important, and I have it on your worksheet for you to do when you leave today or some other time when you're sitting down and thinking about this, is to really do an inventory of what your personal and professional assets are. So really, it's what do you have to contribute? I bet none of you have ever done that. You might do your resume or what you've accomplished or those, but really what characteristics, what attributes, what personality traits, what experience, what ambition, what network, what are all these things that you have to contribute? Do an inventory of it. Write it all down. And be very mindful. Here's the most important thing about your personal brand and why it's important for you to be very intentional about who you are and what you stand for. When you think of any kind of brand, people think, oh, well, it's very, like, how do you learn about a brand? And people think, oh, it's very self-promoting. So there are 3 ways, and only 3 ways, people find out about any commercial brand, whether it's Apple or Ohio State or anything. And what are they? 3 ways. Only 3 ways you find out about a brand. Word of mouth, experience. Advertising, very good. So there are 3 ways, and only 3 ways people are going to find out about you, and you, and you, and you. And one is you tell them, advertising. Another one is someone else tells them, word of mouth. Or third, experience, they meet you. So the way I calculate things is that you are in charge of 2.5, I would even say 2 3/4 of those things. So if you're sitting there going, wow, man, I should be in the corner office. Boy, I have this to contribute. Well, the only person you have to blame is yourself, because you have to communicate about yourself, which I know is very uncomfortable. So instead of it being about self-promotion, it needs to be about how you can contribute. So think about when you interview people, which I'm sure many of you do in your jobs. You know, there's a very distinguishing way. I have to think of I was on a search committee for a group recently for a CEO, and it was one person just came in and told us how brilliant he was, and he was brilliant, great credentials, how he did this and did that and did this and did that, and it was wonderful and brilliant. And the next person, equally as brilliant, came in and told us how he was going to contribute and lead the organization forward. They both had very similar credentials. Well, guess who got the role? Right? So if you really, again, it goes back to what I say about losing the nerves, focusing on other people. If you focus on what you have to contribute, not self-promotion, you'll get there. Because, most of us don't like people who are self-promoting, right? But we do want to be able to contribute something. So I really want you to change your mindset. In fact, if this is one of the only things you take away today is the fact that you have to tell people what you have to contribute, I'll be okay with that. It's really important. Okay, next tip for you is developing a point of view. People with executive presence have a point of view. All of you right now have different messages that you probably give over and over and over and over. And you should find a way to do it in a way that is memorable. So for example, I have to tell a lot of people who communicate, mostly executive leadership type people, that they're using too much information. They're killing people with data. No one's hearing your message because it's clouded with too much information and too many PowerPoints and too many graphs. And so I will say, logic gets people to think, emotion gets people to act. What do you want to happen, right? Because it's a message I have to deliver all the time. So think about the messages that you have to deliver all the time and find an interesting way to say it. Very simple, but have a point of view related, and so they use those messages that have a very strong point of view about it. It is okay to have an opinion as long as you're open to others. So people should know what your management philosophy is. People should know how you do business, right? I'm gonna have to make sure I don't give Bill any more candy bars. And so you know what they stand for, right? So people should know, your team should know, your peers should know what your philosophy and your point of view is. So this is a very simple tip, and it's called Get Perspective. But this is what I call being eyes up. So many times we are bogged in the details, and again, I think details are very, very important. But when you're talking about executive presence, it's certainly critical to understand how everything fits in the big picture. If you can go and frame things and understand how they fit into the ultimate goal, you will definitely be exuding executive presence. It's what I call eyes up thinking. And what I mean by eyes up thinking is, I have a wonderful husband, but he has a car fetish. And a couple years ago, I was looking for a gift to buy him for a special occasion that I didn't have to insure. And so I went looking around, and I found this performance driving school. Has anyone done like the race driving school? Pretty neat, isn't it? So you're gonna know, you probably know what I mean by eyes up already. So when you walk into the driving school, you look down and there's a counter you go up to and it says eyes up. And so you look up and you look around and there's another sign that says eyes up. And everywhere you go, and in fact, even when I went in the women's restroom, it said eyes up. Now, I don't know if it was true in the men's restroom, and I don't know if it's such a good idea to have that sign in there, but you get the idea. And the reason why they teach you that is because if you get behind the wheel of a performance race car and go the speeds that they're going to go, if you have your normal vantage point out the windshield, you are going to crash. They teach you to just move your head and have your eyes up just a little bit. And if you do, you're going to be able to navigate the speeds. It's amazing to me, we're so ingrained to stay, because we live, right? We live at that vantage point. We live out that windshield, that normal spot. You have to go like this. And that's what I want you to do for executive presence. Get out of your department, get out of your current mindset, and look at the big picture. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a difference between being able to navigate and not. So have what I call eyes up thinking. Use eyes up thinking. Right? So think beyond just your area. Think beyond just your industry. Think beyond just your country. I mean, think big and really have perspective on how things are happening. That's a really important thing that the people with executive presence understand. So do you like this? Is this how you all look on Fridays? This is me on Friday afternoon, right? So this is going to something I would tell you not to do. Don't tell people how busy you are. People with executive presence don't go around, oh gosh, I have 10 phone calls today, and then I have to get on a plane, and then I got this, and I got this, and I have so much. They have to do that. They have to do that. But when people are like, oh, I'm so busy, well, I think, well, then you can't handle anything else, right? People think it's a minor thing, but it really reflects on your brand, it reflects on your executive presence level. Don't tell people how busy you are all the time, okay? That's just a nice little one that you could start doing right now. And now you're going to start to listen to people, and you're thinking about people who always say how busy they are, right? It's not your CEO, I guarantee that. He or she's not running around telling you how busy they are, but they are. So be that. Have perspective and realize there's always going to be work. Another tip as we get close to ending up here is using simple language. As we know, we live in a soundbite society, right? You know, I had someone say, I'm not saying dumb down your messages, I'm just saying make them clear and simple and use plain language. Just use very simple language so people understand what you say. I know there's one, I work with one executive who's always talking about things above the bar and below the bar. And he has, I don't know how many thousands of people reporting to him around the globe, and a lot of them are frontline workers. But they get what he says. They understand above the line, below. His board of directors understands above the line, below the line. It's just a very simple thing that he created to explain something that they need to do at the organization. Use easy, simple language, right? So when you think about, words are very, very important, and one of the things I see a lot is people using conditional language. I see this more in women than I do in men, but what I mean by conditional language is, I'll try, I should, I might, we may. So if someone says to you, do you think we should do this? Well, you know, I think we might want to consider this if you think it's okay, as opposed to saying, not only do I think we should consider it, I think we have to do it because our 5 competitors are already doing it and we're behind. There's a difference. Take the conditional language out. Don't apologize unless you did something wrong. Don't be saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. For what? It's like giving away your influence and giving away your power, right? Don't apologize, don't use conditional language. Now, I just have to throw one caveat out there. Sometimes it is important to use conditional language when you're trying to get buy-in. So I know someone in there's thinking, I need to use conditional language with XYZ population. Hey, keep doing it, I understand. But generally, overall, watch the conditional language. It really does take away your oomph, right? So we talked about body language. Okay, everybody gets to stand up. I'm not going to make you dance or anything, but everybody stand up. Ah, nice stretch. Okay. So I want you to make yourselves as physically small as you can and say, my name is, whatever your name is, and I am powerful. So make yourself as small as you can. I'm going to do it on the count of 3. As small as you can, my name is blank, and I am powerful. Ready? Go. My name is... That was lovely. Lovely. Now, I want you to get into your favorite superhero posture. And I want you to say, my name is blank and I am powerful. Ready? Superheroes, 1, 2, 3, go! My name is blank and I am powerful. Ta-da! Okay, you can sit down. Very nice, very nice. Feel any differently? You're like, yeah, I'm so glad I got to do this on a Tuesday morning. But the point is, when there's some very simple things that you did naturally. You took more space, right? You took more space in your second pose. Whether it was with your posture, you were stronger, you weren't moving around, your heads were up, your eyes were up. Most of you physically had more powerful gestures. You were louder. So all of these things matter when you're trying to exude your executive presence. Little things. When you are doing that observation and feedback, when you see yourself on video, we all have tendencies, right? So some of us trail off at the end of a sentence. Some of us don't use gestures. Some of us, whatever it is. Find out what yours is, and then do this kind of stuff, right? Be strong in your stance. Be powerful with your gestures. I always say take up as much space as you can. You know, that's a mentality, right? Take up as much space as you can. whether it's with your voice, with your gestures, with your smiles, whatever it is. I threw some things up here. Another thing that you will find when you videotape yourself, if you haven't already, is you're going to find out what your nervous habit is. And you all have one. We're all blessed with our nervous thing. I play with my jewelry. Have I done it? I don't think I've done it today. But I play with my jewelry. I'll be sitting in a meeting like, why am I playing with my jewelry? It's just weird. It's a weird thing, right? I have a common one are people are lip smackers. A lot of lip smackers. You'll be shocked when you see yourself on video. Figure out what yours is and try to mitigate it a little bit. Just a little bit. You know what? Again, success, not perfection. So take up your space. Wrapping up here, we talked about empathy enough, so I think you get it, but I really, really am a big believer. I'm a big believer, so make sure. And see, there you go. Look at that. That's everyone's office environment. So here, you're not going to be surprised that I'm going to say that logic gets people to think and emotion gets people to act. People with executive presence are not afraid of appropriate emotion. Emotion is good, as long as it's appropriate. Not saying, break down in the boardroom, but appropriate emotion for the situation is critical because it's real, right? It's real. So make sure that you're not afraid of that, but you also have it intact. So the next thing last couple tips I leave you with, one is get out of your office. And again, this can be conceptually. I always say to people that your power comes from outside the building. And why I say that is your power comes from relationships, it comes from networking, it comes from information, it comes from learning, it comes from trends, it comes from the market, it comes from wherever it might be, right? But that value, if you can learn more of what's going on outside your building, you can bring it back and be more valuable in your building. Right? And I say bricks and mortar, it's conceptually. So pay attention to things that are happening. People with great executive presence do this, right? So they make sure that they get out of there. Also, people that have that mentality have the right people in their lives. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what this is. One is to have your centers of influence, or what I call COIs. Every single one of you should have at least 10, depending on what you do for a living, maybe more, 10 people who I consider your centers of influence. These are people who are just that. They are at the crux, and they're very influential on helping you make your goals, helping you meet whatever you're trying to do in this world. Those people need to be cultivated and maintained, and you need to be very purposeful about that. So again, if this is the only tactic you take out today, I want you to do this, because those relationships can make or break what you're doing and help you advance your goals in a great way. Plus, it's fun. I mean, we're all about connection too, and we're all trying to, there's so many people out there doing so many wonderful things. Having your very specific group of centers of influence is really important. People with executive presence definitely have a strong reserve of people, right, and relationships that are sincere and strong. So this is a very technical term. These are your peeps. You like that? So everyone should have these kind of people in your life, right? You should have someone who gets you fired up, someone that helps you with vision, someone that blows holes into your arguments, right? The emotional supporter that when you had a rough day, that they think it was never your fault. You're great no matter what you do. We all need all these different people in our lives. And sometimes one person can serve more than one role, but we should all have this kind of support. It's a lot easier to be confident and have all those 5 C's and be successful and have executive presence when you have this support, right? So make sure you do. Finally, a few things to keep in mind is to follow the 7-11 rule. So the 7-11 rule is actually in a book from Roger Ailes. It's basically the law of first impressions, and it says in the first 7 seconds, people make 11 impressions about you, which is why I want you to be so intentional about your personal brand. There's a little twist on the 7-11 rule. We all know first impressions, and we've heard that our whole lives. But let's say you've been working at the same company for 5 years or 10 years. How do you renew that? Well, there are 2 times that the 7-11 rule resets. One is when people see you speaking. So whether you're speaking in a meeting or you take the podium or wherever it is, you look at that person differently. So think of like your peer who you see gets up and gives a big speech. You're like, you look at them, he or she differently for that first 7 seconds. And the other time that 7 seconds resets is when people see you in an environment that they're not used to seeing you. So they see you on the golf course instead of the office. You better have a good shot off the first tee. Or they run into you at the grocery store or a concert or with your kids or whatever it might be. They see you in a whole different light. So be very cognizant of the 7-11 rule and know that you, you need to be very intentional. Polish your speaking skills. None of us need to be great orators like Barack Obama or whoever you think is a great speaker, but you need to be able to articulate and you need to be comfortable. That's about it. If you really want great executive presence, run a great meeting. People will come to them, they'll love them, you'll get things done. It's a nice morale booster. Finally, the one thing I want to point out here is using third parties for credibility. All of you have champions in your life and in your careers right now. You all have champions. They want to help you. So elicit them, ask them to help you in however way that you think is appropriate, right? Maybe one of your champions is a great leader who you could come speak to your team. Have them come speak to your team. Find ways to use your champions and ask them to help you and make sure, hey, could you put a good word in for me here? Could you do that? That's a really important thing to do. I could spend a whole day on social media, what I won't, but all I will say about it is just don't put anything up there that's stupid. It makes me crazy. People need to find you. If you have executive presence, it doesn't mean you can banish the internet, which I know a lot of my leaders try to do. You have to be there. You have to have presence, but you don't have to do anything silly. Okay, so readers are leaders, leaders are readers. There's some references for you as far as books and references, and I have a bunch of others. But getting ready to wrap up here, any questions? Burning desire to say anything? Yeah, please.
More efficient and effective to spend time increasing your strengths or trying to better your weaknesses?
So it's a great question. So he asks, is it better to spend time increasing your strengths or mitigating your weaknesses? And I hear this question a lot, and I know there's all books out there and leading with your strengths and et cetera. This is not a cop-out. I say you lead with your strongest strengths, but you have to make sure your one really, really bad weakness that holds you back has to be mitigated. So if you're really bad at details or you're not a good people person, you better make sure that you have someone as your right hand who's a great people person. Right? Because you're probably never going to change that strength completely or that weakness completely, but you need to mitigate it. So I say mostly lead with your strengths, but make sure your Achilles is covered, it's mitigated. Yes?
Most of what you spoke about today, I can see how it can apply into an international exposure. Is there any other things that you think we should know about, or is that a subject for another day?
That's a great question, and I'm really happy that she stood up. She has great executive presence, and she stood up because she's in the back of the room. Thank you. It's a great question. And there is a whole different nuance about executive presence in the international world and culturally. And actually, I can't think of her, Sylvia Hewitt, who's been in Columbus before and spoken on executive presence, has a niche where she really talks about how executive presence affects us culturally and internationally. And I would encourage you to look at her book. It's really good, and it could take a whole nother day, but it's a great point and a very good question.
We are out of time.
I got to say one thing, just one quick thing. So for those of you who knew Paul Oddie, I don't know if anyone knew Paul Oddie, but Paul was one of the original founders of Ross Leadership, and we recently lost Paul just at the end of September. He started these breakfasts. He started the Leadership Institute. It was a huge inspiration, and this is the very first one we've done since we've lost Paul. So I just want to acknowledge him and just know that because of these things and because of Paul, the ongoing learning continues. So thanks for being here.